Every industrial empire follows the same trajectory toward irrelevance. First, they lose their energy advantage, then their manufacturing base, finally, their economic sovereignty. The process is always gradual, always rationalized, and always irreversible once it reaches critical mass. 3 weeks ago, BASF announced the permanent closure of its Ludwigshafen ammonia plants. Not a temporary shutdown, not a restructuring, a permanent closure of facilities that have operated continuously since 1913. The same week, Volkswagen confirmed the closure of 3 German factories for the first time in the company's 87-year history. Bayer followed with plans to eliminate 12,000 jobs across its German operations. These weren't isolated corporate decisions. These were symptoms of something far more systematic and dangerous than most people realize. They represent the early stages of what historians will recognize as the deindustrialization of Germany, the economic powerhouse that has anchored European prosperity for 7 decades. What makes this different is the scale. Germany isn't just another industrial region in decline. It's the manufacturing center of the world's 4th largest economy, the technological leader in precision engineering, chemicals, and automotive production. When Germany deindustrializes, it reshapes global supply chains and fundamentally alters the balance of economic power. And it's happening faster than anyone expected. Surface event. German industrial production has fallen 12% from pre-pandemic levels with no recovery in sight. Energy-intensive industries, chemicals, steel, aluminum, glass, have seen production drops of 20% to 30%. These aren't temporary disruptions. These are structural adjustments to a reality where German manufacturing is no longer globally competitive. Natural gas prices in Germany remained 400% higher than pre-2022 levels despite massive government subsidies. Electricity costs for industrial users have tripled. Energy now represents 15% to 25% of total production costs, compared to 3% to 5% previously. BASF's mathematics are stark. The company spent $2.2 billion on natural gas in 2019 while producing at full capacity. In 2023, that cost reached $7.8 billion for significantly reduced production. You cannot remain competitive when input costs increase 300% while competitors face no such burden. The chemical sector faces the most immediate threat. Chemical production requires abundant, cheap natural gas not just as energy, but as raw material. Russia provided that gas through long-term contracts for 5 decades. Those contracts are gone forever. The Nord Stream pipelines have been physically destroyed. Covestro announced closure of its Dormagen facility, citing energy costs and reliability concerns. Modern chemical processes cannot accommodate power interruptions that renewable energy creates during windless periods. Lanxess reported energy costs now represent 28% of expenses, compared to 8% in 2019. When chemical production relocates, entire supply chains follow. German pharmaceutical companies like Bayer announced facility closures in Berlin and Wuppertal, moving production to China, India, and the United States, where energy remains manageable. The automotive sector confronts equally systemic challenges. German automakers built their advantage on precision engineering, premium branding, and internal combustion engines. Electric vehicle transition undermines all 3 pillars simultaneously. Tesla produces electric vehicles more efficiently than BMW produces conventional vehicles. Chinese manufacturers like BYD are closing quality gaps while maintaining significant cost advantages through government subsidies and vertical integration. Electric vehicle production requires entirely different materials and expertise. Lithium, cobalt, and rare earth elements become critical inputs. Software development becomes more important than mechanical engineering. Battery chemistry matters more than engine design. Volkswagen invested $7 billion in electric development, but still lags Tesla and Chinese manufacturers in efficiency and costs. VW's electric vehicles require 30% more manufacturing time than Tesla models. Chinese competitors produce similar vehicles at 40% lower costs. The Audi plant in Brussels announced closure by 2025 with no replacement production planned. 3,000 employees possess specialized engine knowledge that becomes obsolete in an electric world. The machine tool industry faces subtle but dangerous threats. German precision machinery has been exported worldwide for over a century, providing equipment other countries use to build industrial capacity. But as German costs rise, global demand decreases. China now produces 28% of global machine tools, up from 3% in 2000. Quality approaches German standards while costs remain 50 to 60% lower. Japanese companies like DMG Mori have matched German precision while offering superior automation. Trumpf reported 15% decline in orders, announcing layoffs affecting 2,800 employees. Germany finds itself helping other countries replace German manufacturing by providing advanced tools they need for competitive domestic industries. Steel shows similar patterns. ThyssenKrupp announced blast furnace closures in Duisburg, citing energy costs, making German steel uncompetitive against imports. German steel production fell 25% since 2019. Capacity utilization dropped below 70%. Salzgitter reported losses for 3 consecutive years and plans 30% capacity reduction. ArcelorMittal's German operations face potential closures affecting 4,500 employees if energy costs don't decrease. The aluminum industry demonstrates how energy-intensive production becomes unviable. German aluminum production fell 40% since 2021, with smelters closing permanently. Aluminum requires continuous operation. Facilities cannot restart once shut down. These sectoral challenges represent interconnected symptoms of broader transformation. When chemical production becomes uneconomical, downstream industries face shortages and price increases. When automotive production relocates, vast supplier networks follow. The German government responded with $200 billion in energy subsidies, corporate tax reductions, and accelerated depreciation. These represent managed decline rather than solutions. When you subsidize energy costs, you acknowledge structural uncompetitiveness. Historical parallel. This sequence has played out before. Same pattern, same stages, same outcome. Industrial empires don't lose manufacturing through sudden shocks. They lose it through gradual erosion that becomes irreversible. Britain provides the instructive parallel. In 1870, Britain produced 32% of global steel, 65% of coal, and 46% of iron. Manchester was the workshop of the world. British manufacturing dominated through superior technology and cheaper energy. British dominance seemed permanent. Abundant coal-fueled steam engines and steel production. British engineers invented most industrial technologies. The Royal Navy protected trade routes, advantaging exporters. But by 1913, percentages were falling as America and Germany industrialized using newer technologies. The real collapse occurred 1970-2010. Manufacturing employment fell from 8.1 million to 2.7 million. Steel production dropped 80%. Coal fell 90%. Shipbuilding virtually disappeared. Britain transformed from industrial to service economy in 4 decades. Stage 1 was energy disadvantage. Britain's dominance was built on cheap coal. As oil became primary energy and North Sea reserves peaked, Britain lost cost advantage. Energy-intensive industries became uncompetitive first, exactly as we see in Germany. British chemical giant ICI began closing UK facilities during the 1970s as energy costs made production uneconomical. The company relocated operations to countries with cheaper energy, eventually selling assets to foreign competitors. By 2008, ICI was completely dismantled. Stage 2 involved technological disruption. British companies perfected 19th century technologies but proved slow adopting 20th century innovations. Minimills for steel, automated assembly, petrochemical processes were pioneered elsewhere, while British companies continued traditional methods. British Leyland exemplifies this complacency. The company produced vehicles using techniques unchanged since the 1950s, while Japanese automakers revolutionized production through just-in-time systems. By the 1980s, British vehicles were notorious for poor quality, leading to market collapse. Machine tools provide another parallel. British companies like Alfred Herbert dominated global markets for precision machinery. But as manufacturing shifted toward computer-controlled systems, British firms failed adapting quickly enough. German and Japanese competitors captured leadership. Stage 3 featured financial prioritization. London's financial sector grew rapidly, offering higher returns with less infrastructure requirements. The Big Bang deregulation in 1986 made London a global center, while manufacturing struggled for investment. Banking attracted the most capable graduates. Cultural prestige of city careers far exceeded manufacturing management, creating brain drain from industrial sectors. Financial growth created feedback loops, accelerating manufacturing decline. Stage 4 involved political acceptance of deindustrialization as inevitable and beneficial. By the 1980s, British policymakers described manufacturing as sunset industries, naturally replaced by knowledge work. Margaret Thatcher embraced this transformation, viewing decline as creative destruction, making the economy more efficient. Her government reduced subsidies, eliminated trade protections, allowed foreign acquisition without restriction. Market forces would determine allocation. If manufacturing wasn't competitive, it should disappear. The result was systematic dismantling of British capacity. By 2020, Britain produced less steel than in 1870, despite 3 times the population. Manufacturing represented 10% of output compared to 35% in 1970. But Britain lost more than jobs. COVID-19 revealed strategic vulnerabilities. Britain couldn't produce basic medical equipment domestically, depending on imports from countries maintaining industrial capacity. When Ukraine conflict affected energy markets, Britain lacked flexibility to adjust quickly. Countries maintaining capacity Germany, Japan, South Korea proved more resilient during crises because they retained productive capabilities for rapid adjustment. The parallel with Germany is precise. German policymakers use identical language British leaders employed during the 1970s. They speak of transitioning to knowledge economy while accepting manufacturing migration to lower-cost countries. These aren't economic arguments. They're rationalizations enabling acceptance of industrial defeat by reframing competitive failure as strategic evolution. The Netherlands and Sweden provide additional examples. Dutch shipbuilding was globally dominant, but energy costs, Asian competition, and technological changes led to systematic decline. By 1990, Dutch shipbuilding virtually disappeared. Swedish patterns followed identically. Systemic fracture. German deindustrialization represents broader realignment accelerating after 2022. The European Union ironically created frameworks now accelerating German decline rather than protecting it. German apprenticeship systems historically produced skilled workforces enabling industrial excellence. However, younger Germans increasingly pursue university education and service careers rather than manufacturing training, viewing industrial work as less prestigious and potentially less secure. Skilled manufacturing workers now average 52 years of age, compared to 41 in 2000. Over the next decade, 4.2 million skilled workers will reach retirement, while apprenticeship programs produce only 1.8 million potential replacements annually. BMW's Munich plant employs 18,000 workers averaging 49 years old. Over 7 years, 6,200 will become eligible for retirement. BMW's apprenticeship programs graduate approximately 200 students annually, far below replacement requirements. Siemens reported similar demographics across German facilities, with critical shortages and specialized roles requiring extensive knowledge: automation engineering, precision measurement, advanced materials processing. These aren't jobs quickly filled through immigration or automation. They require deep institutional knowledge. As skilled workforces age and retire without adequate replacement, companies face difficult choices: invest heavily in training, accept reduced productivity from inexperienced workers, or relocate to countries with available skilled workforces. Companies increasingly choose relocation. Technological disruption paradoxically accelerates demographic pressures rather than solving them. Industry 4.0 and automation were supposed addressing workforce challenges by reducing dependence on human labor. German companies invested $200 billion in advanced technologies over the past decade. But technological advancement systematically reduces importance of skilled labor advantages, historically differentiating German manufacturing. When production becomes highly automated, marginal value of skilled workers declines. When robotics handle precision tasks, traditional skills become redundant. Volkswagen's Tennessee factory uses German-designed automation, but employs workers with significantly less training than equivalent German facilities. Automated systems enable competitive production, with American workers earning 60% less than German counterparts. VW used German technology, eliminating German employment. The EU was designed strengthening German manufacturing through broader markets and specialized supply chains. German factories could produce complex goods using components throughout Europe while selling across the Union. But integration created vulnerabilities competitors now exploit. When energy costs rise specifically in Germany, manufacturers face higher costs than EU competitors accessing alternative sources. The single market supposed to protect German industry provides mechanisms for production relocation while maintaining market access. Eastern European countries deliberately positioned themselves as manufacturing alternatives. Poland invested $40 billion in industrial infrastructure since 2004, much designed attracting German companies. Czech Republic developed automotive clusters. Hungary created electronics hubs. These countries offer labor costs 60-70% lower than Germany, newer facilities, identical EU market access. When German companies face cost pressures, Eastern relocation becomes obvious while maintaining competitiveness and relationships. But migration creates permanent advantages for destination countries. When Siemens relocated washing machine production to Poland, it transferred engineering expertise, quality systems, supplier relationships. Poland developed capabilities enabling independent competition rather than serving merely as production platform. This creates self-reinforcing cycles where German decline accelerates Eastern development, making Germany less competitive and Eastern Europe more attractive for future investment. German companies inadvertently fund development of their own replacements. COVID-19 revealed how dependent German manufacturing had become on complex international supply chains, prioritizing efficiency over resilience. Just-in-time systems maximizing efficiency became catastrophic liabilities when borders closed and schedules became unpredictable. German manufacturers responded by shortening supply chains and increasing inventory buffers, but these adjustments necessarily reduce efficiency and increase costs. Continental announced $1.4 billion additional inventory. Bosch implemented dual sourcing, increasing procurement costs 15%. The energy crisis exposed Germany's strategic vulnerability. German competitiveness was built on assumptions of abundant, cheap energy through long-term Russian contracts. Destruction of that relationship forces manufacturers competing using market-rate energy while competitors maintain subsidized access. The renewable transition compounds challenges. Solar and wind generation is intermittent and weather-dependent. Industrial production requires constant energy supply. Chemical production, steel manufacturing cannot be interrupted without destroying batches worth millions. Germany invested $500 billion in renewable infrastructure over 2 decades, but this hasn't provided reliable, cost-effective energy. German companies face higher costs and lower reliability compared to competitors with diverse energy portfolios. Meanwhile, countries with natural resources position themselves as alternatives. The United States offers energy costs 60% lower than Germany for chemical production. Middle Eastern countries provide subsidies making costs dramatically lower. ExxonMobil announced $20 billion in new U.S. chemical facilities, targeting markets German producers are abandoning. Saudi Aramco's SABIC partnership represents production capacity, specifically designed replacing German leadership positions. These countries aren't competing for individual facilities. They're capturing entire ecosystems. When production relocates, it brings research capabilities, specialized knowledge, supplier networks, downstream industries. The European Central Bank's monetary policy compounds pressures while benefiting financial assets over industrial competitiveness. Low rates and quantitative easing primarily inflated asset prices while failing to address cost disadvantages. German manufacturers face high energy costs, elevated labor costs, increasing regulatory expenses, while competing against manufacturers with advantages across all categories. Monetary policy cannot solve structural problems requiring fundamental restructuring. The euro prevents Germany using devaluation to restore competitiveness. During previous crises, Germany could devalue the Deutschmark, making exports competitive. Under the euro, Germany must address problems through internal adjustments, reducing costs, or accepting market losses. These adjustments are politically difficult and economically painful. German wages would need falling 25-30% to restore parity with Eastern European alternatives, an impossible adjustment politically and economically devastating for consumption. Escalation. Through context, forces driving German deindustrialization extend beyond energy costs to encompass demographic, technological, financial, and geopolitical shifts, making the process self-accelerating and difficult to reverse. Demographics provide deepest structural pressure. Germany's working-age population peaked 2005 and has been declining since, with birth rates below replacement levels for 5 decades. Manufacturing depends on skilled workers developing expertise through decades of experience. Financial dynamics compound demographic and technological pressures by redirecting German capital toward international opportunities, offering better returns than German industrial projects constrained by high costs. German pension funds increased international allocations from 35% in 2019 to 52% in 2023, seeking better returns. Allianz invested $12 billion in American facilities, while reducing German manufacturing investments 31%. This creates perverse dynamics where German savings finance industrial development in competing countries, while German industry faces capital constraints. Mercedes-Benz's Alabama expansion is partially financed through German banks using German funds. The EU's regulatory framework often produces unintended consequences, encouraging production relocation outside Europe. Environmental regulations, labor protections increase costs across EU countries, but fall disproportionately on countries like Germany with higher baseline expenses. EU carbon pricing adds $180 per ton to German steel and aluminum production, making industries uncompetitive against imports from countries without carbon pricing. When companies relocate outside the EU, they escape regulatory costs while maintaining market access. ThyssenKrupp's partnership with Nucor enables serving European markets, with American steel avoiding EU regulations. The company uses European engineering expertise, establishing American production, competing against remaining European facilities. Geopolitical realignment provides the final piece. Germany's industrial model was built on assumptions of stable trade, reliable energy supplies, continued technological cooperation. The Ukraine conflict destroyed these assumptions permanently. Energy relationships carry geopolitical risks, making planning extremely difficult when energy represents 20 to 25% of costs. Technological cooperation faces security restrictions, limiting access to critical components. Germany must rebuild its model within a fragmented world where efficiency competes with security. During this transition, countries with secure energy supplies, self-sufficient supply chains, stable markets gain compound advantages. The United States leverages domestic resources, continental supply chains, unified political control. China combines energy partnerships, integrated supply chains, state coordination. These forces, demographics, technology finance, regulation, geopolitical fragmentation, interact synergistically, accelerating German deindustrialization beyond what any single factor would produce. Each pressure reinforces others, creating momentum increasingly difficult to counter. Historical warning. What we observe in Germany today is systematic transfer of industrial capacity. Historians recognize as the defining characteristic of imperial decline, not military defeat or political collapse, but quiet relocation of productive capability from established centers to rising challengers. Every major industrial power has confronted this transition. None successfully reversed the process once reaching critical mass, defined by psychological acceptance among decision makers that industrial decline represents inevitable progress rather than preventable failure. German business leaders, policymakers, intellectual elites articulate identical rationalizations. British leaders employed during the 1970s and 1980s, they describe manufacturing as sunset industries, naturally replaced by knowledge work and high-value services, providing better opportunities for educated populations. They argue Germany can maintain prosperity by specializing in research, development, services, while importing manufactured goods from countries with comparative advantages in production. These are not economic arguments. They are psychological rationalizations enabling acceptance of industrial defeat by reframing competitive failure as a strategic evolution. The British experience provides detailed preview of where this leads. By 2020, Britain imported 60% of manufactured goods, including steel, chemicals, electronics once exported globally. Manufacturing fell from 35% of workforce to 8%. The transition generated wealth for London's financial sector while devastating manufacturing communities. More critically, Britain lost industrial capacity, providing economic resilience during crises. When COVID-19 disrupted supply chains, Britain couldn't produce basic medical equipment domestically. When Ukraine conflict affected energy markets, Britain lacked flexibility to adjust quickly. Countries maintaining capacity, Germany, Japan, South Korea, demonstrated superior resilience because they retained productive capabilities for rapid adjustment. But Germany's deindustrialization occurs under more dangerous conditions than Britain faced. Other major powers increasingly view industrial capacity as national security assets. The United States implements unprecedented industrial policy rebuilding domestic manufacturing through CHIPS Act, Inflation Reduction Act, hundreds of billions, specifically reducing foreign dependence. China systematically expands capacity across virtually all categories while developing technologies challenging Western leadership. Made in China 2025 explicitly targets dominance in aerospace, robotics, artificial intelligence, biotechnology. India, Vietnam, Mexico position themselves as manufacturing alternatives while building domestic ecosystems, providing employment and strategic autonomy. Germany moves opposite when others prioritize industrial self-sufficiency. The transfer accelerates visibly. Chinese companies systematically acquire German technology through investment, joint ventures, talent recruitment. American corporations relocate European operations, capitalizing on lower energy costs and government subsidies. Middle Eastern countries construct facilities specifically replacing German capacity. Saudi Aramco's SABIC partnership represents $20 billion targeting markets where German companies held leadership. This isn't normal competition, it's systematic relocation of technological capabilities requiring decades to develop. When BASF closes German facilities while expanding in China and America, it transfers accumulated knowledge, making German chemicals globally dominant. Same patterns appear across sectors: automotive engineering relocating to electric vehicle centers, machine tool innovation shifting to growing markets, pharmaceutical research moving to favorable regulatory environments. Germany systematically enables its own decline by facilitating transfer of technological capabilities. German companies sell advanced technology to foreign competitors. German universities train international students returning home with German knowledge. German policies prioritize short-term cost reduction over long-term capability preservation. History demonstrates this becomes irreversible once critical thresholds are crossed. When industrial ecosystems fragment, they cannot be easily reconstructed because competitiveness depends on complex networks of suppliers, specialized knowledge, workforce skills developing over generations. When technological leadership transfers through systematic knowledge migration, it rarely returns because advancement builds cumulatively on previous innovations, creating path dependencies, favoring countries maintaining continuous investment. Britain attempted reversing deindustrialization through numerous initiatives over 4 decades: regional development programs, tax incentives, public-private partnerships, direct government investment. These efforts slowed decline but proved incapable of restoring manufacturing capacity or recovering technological leadership. The mathematics are unforgiving. When you lose productive capacity, you lose institutional knowledge, enabling that capacity. When you lose institutional knowledge, you lose ability to recreate capabilities even when conditions become favorable. Germany confronts this choice today, but the window closes rapidly. Every factory closing permanently eliminates capacity and specialized knowledge. Every company relocating transfers capabilities abroad. Every skilled worker retiring without training. Replacements reduces foundations. Competitiveness requires. German deindustrialization isn't economically inevitable. It's psychologically chosen. Once made collectively across institutions, these choices become economic realities extraordinarily difficult to reverse. History watches. Other countries position themselves capturing what Germany appears ready to surrender. The transfer from Europe to other regions isn't distant, it's current, accelerating with each decision, prioritizing short-term costs over long-term preservation. What happens in Germany over the next decade determines whether Europe maintains its position as major industrial region or transitions to dependence on imports from countries choosing to preserve capabilities. The decision is being made through thousands of individual choices by companies, workers, policymakers who may not realize they're participating in one of the most significant economic transitions in modern history. The event isn't the warning, the acceptance is the warning. And acceptance is becoming embedded in German institutions at precisely the moment when industrial capacity becomes more strategically valuable for economic sovereignty and geopolitical influence.